Good afternoon, folks, and welcome to our April 2021 Nature 101 program, Scouting for Salamanders. My name is Paige Engelbrektsson, and I am the Nature Center Education Specialist for the Highlands Biological Foundation. If you're not familiar with it, the foundation supports natural history research and education here in the Southern Appalachians, primarily right here at the Highlands Biological Station through programs like this one. Our Nature 101 program is an exploration in the off-season of natural history topics, questions, or ideas. And kind of in honor of Salamander Saturday on May 1st and Earth Day, we are doing scouting for salamanders. Salamanders are fantastic and amazing anyway, but if you have ever been to the Southern Appalachians, such as the Great Smokies or here in Highlands, you will have heard them referred to as the salamander capital of the world. That is not hyperbole. We are, in fact, the one region you can find more kinds of salamanders than anywhere else in the world. And there are some really good reasons for that. So today, by exploring where we can find salamanders here at the Botanical Garden, but more broadly in the Southern Appalachians, I'm hoping to help you figure out why we have so many. All right. So let's kick things off by brainstorming about where, if we are in fact scouting for salamanders, we should be looking. Where have you or your kids or your grandkids or your pets found salamanders in the past? Or if you haven't found any, where would you expect to find them? When I think of, let me get out of the dark sun. When I think of the kinds of places I can find salamanders in, I find they fit 3 criteria. And we're going to cover one of those at each of our 3 stops today. And I'm going to do my best not to get sidetracked on why salamanders are so awesome or why we have so many of them here, because I could talk about that for a very long time. But this is just a 101. It's just a brief introduction. So let's see in the comments or in the privacy of your own head, what has come up? What kind of suggestions do we have? Somebody saying a garage? I've heard of salamanders found there before. Some people might be saying a walk-in basement. I have personally found salamanders in my walk-in basement before. These are places that do fit those 3 criteria. And I bet you we have some people who are also saying things like maybe under logs or in a stream or under rocks or in the ground. I was digging in my garden and I found a salamander. Not uncommon. So we're going to start with one kind of place we can find salamanders and go from there. So here we can see logs that we cut up from an old snag that fell down last year. These are kind of sizable logs, but actually, if I'm walking around the trails thinking of places to look for salamanders, this is one of the first things that's going to catch my eye. See if you can figure out why a log might be a good spot as I make one quick safety note, which is when we lift rocks or roll logs, we have an option. We can roll it away from us or towards us. If I roll it away from me, then anything that's underneath a log or rock that wants to come out is only going to have the option of coming out towards me. If I roll the log towards me, however, anything that's under there that wants to get out will have the option of going away from me. Given that salamanders are not the only things that we find underneath logs and rocks, I'm going to make the strong recommendation, if you decide to go scouting for salamanders and roll logs or lift rocks, do it towards you so anything else that's under there can go away from you. And I rolled one of our logs and look at who I have found. itty bitty beautiful little Ocoee salamander. Look at the way his colors just glow. That copper stripe down his back, oh, absolutely gorgeous. So I'm gonna switch back to the front view, and I want you to imagine if you were here in person and you were touching the leaves and the loam and the wet wood. What would it feel like? So underneath the log, is it dry or is it pretty damp? So if you're not familiar with salamanders, one of the things that you can do is compare them with a similar animal. Salamanders are amphibians, and there's a very classic amphibian that we've been hearing all spring that I'm actually waiting to hear a few more down by Lindenwood Lake, and that is frogs. Many of the traits that frogs exhibit, salamanders also have, one of which is that cool, moist skin. We often think we have to find frogs by water because they need to avoid drying out, and the same is true for salamanders. Except instead of necessarily hanging out by the water, they hang out in places that are damp. That is the first criteria of places that I think about finding salamanders. The salamanders that I have found in my basement have been in little damp, dark corners. And under rocks are usually, as we saw, much damper compared to the general environment. So because they have moist skin, they need to be someplace that's damp. So with that, I'm gonna actually put him out here outside of the log, because when I roll this back over, if I put him right in the middle there, I could accidentally squish him. So I'm gonna roll the log back over, and now he's over here. He can crawl back under at his leisure and not get smushed. We're gonna keep going, but as we do, I want you to think about, okay, if we need to be damp, why are the Southern Appalachians so good a place for salamanders to live? Those of you who have visited, or especially those of you who live here, are probably gonna have a really good idea about the answer to that. And we're actually coming up on a spot that's a really good illustration. One of our many little waterfalls here at the Botanical Garden. And the reason this area has so many waterfalls is because we have so much water. You may be asking yourselves, where does that water come from? Aren't they up in the mountains? There aren't any big rivers to give them a lot of water. No, there aren't. We are part of a temperate rainforest. And if you've lived here, you know that Highlands can get between 80 to 120 inches of rain a year. Last year, we got 133 inches of rain. We have a lot of water falling on the Southern Appalachians, particularly here in the plateau. And all of that water means that this area stays really moist. The ground is usually not dry. It's usually really wet, has a high moisture content. All of our waterfalls, you'll see them for days after a really good rain. They'll be running really high, really well, because all of the water that gets absorbed into the soils farther up in the mountains is slowly being released and coming down through the streams and waterfalls like this one. So the Southern Appalachians are just really wet in general, which means there are a lot of really damp places for salamanders to hide, which is pretty good for them. We're actually going to keep moving downstream just a little bit because that waterfall is a little loud. But all of that water contributes to the next place that I would look for salamanders in, which is a stream. So is it damp? Yep. And there's a couple of reasons why streams are also a really good place to look. and we'll touch on that once I get in and get my boots wet. If we're looking for salamanders in a stream, if I'm standing here just trying to look through the water, do you guys think I'm going to see many things moving besides fish and water striders, leaves? Highly unlikely. If you think about the fact salamanders are predators, they are carnivorous, they do eat other living things, but they're like this big. Some of them can get larger, but most of them are quite small. So if they're out and about and moving, they are much more likely to be eaten by something else than to be eating something else. So salamander is not likely to be spotted just kind of crawling along the stream bed or up on the banks. If we want to find a salamander in a stream, we have to go looking for them under the rocks in the stream. They're not under rocks just up on land. Here in the stream, it's a little bit different. If you like to find a rock, you can open it towards you. I like to have a little itty bitty aquarium. Oh, hello, friend. Okay, must be my lucky day. I like to have a little bitty aquarium net so I can get the little guys instead of trying to grab them with my hands, because my hand-eye coordination for that kind of thing isn't so great. And I have just found a salamander underneath the very first rock that I flipped. So I'm going to put him in a little bit of water and bring him closer so we can talk about that. All right, so this is the beautiful little salamander that I just found underneath a rock. You can see what I mean by he's teeny tiny. So there is certainly all sorts of stuff in that stream that would like to eat him. Crayfish and other fish. He's absolutely gorgeous though. So one of the things that you can actually see really well is see how tall his tail is? That makes him really good at swimming, like a fish's tail, instead of the long, flat, skinny tail that we saw on our Echoe salamander. I have absolutely no idea what kind of salamander this is, which is not just because larval salamanders can be hard to identify. It also has to do with the fact that all salamanders start their lives off in the stream. So this could be a number of the species that we have here at the Botanical Garden. Like frogs, salamanders lay their eggs in the water or under damp rocks. Most salamanders lay their eggs in the water, and that is where the bitty babies hatch and grow. Some salamander species will eventually come out and live on land. Some salamander species will spend their entire lives in the water. Some will spend most of their time in the water but come out on land. So yeah, this could be any number of species, and I will admit my knowledge is not great enough to know which one it is. But that same process of just lifting a rock, having a little aquarium net, seeing what washes with the water into the net, and then looking very closely for little guys like this. You may find black-bellied salamanders, which are our largest aquatic salamander. They're about yay long. Yeah, there's all sorts of salamanders that you can find in a stream. So if you do find a salamander in the water, keep them in water. However, that's the one major caveat I would say. Have a little container of water if you want to look really closely at them. Have a plastic baggie that you fill with water. Just make sure that you don't start to dry them out. So if we think again about that frog and salamander comparison, frogs lay their eggs in the water. Salamanders generally do too. When frog tadpoles or larvae hatch, they spend that larval stage in the water. Salamander larvae do as well. We do have a lot of water around here. Generally not in big ponds or lakes, but an awful lot of water. And in those streams, they're not smooth and sandy. They have a lot of rocks, which act as shelter. So some place that I'm looking for salamanders, one, I don't want it to be damp. Two, I'd like it to be sheltered. this piece of log, for example. Underneath, probably damp, acts as good shelter. All right, so we've looked under rocks and logs, mostly logs, but theoretically rocks too, and in streams. So we found places that are damp and that are good shelter. There's a third kind of condition that I think of when I think of salamanders. We're going to kick it over to me in the future, who's going to come back here and try and find some salamanders at night. Good luck, future self. I believe in you. Hey folks, so I'm here in the botanical garden at night to see if I can find some more salamanders, because nighttime is the third kind of place and setting that I would look for salamanders for. Not sure what we're gonna find, if anything, but let's see what we turn up. I'm not gonna video me walking around because I am going to fall and hurt myself if I try to multitask in the dark. But fingers crossed we catch something. All right, folks, see if you can spot the salamander in this image. I spotted him way sooner than I was expecting. Which is pretty awesome. So right here, what caught my eye when I was just scanning the ground was his long shape and the darkness of his coloration. This is actually a gray-cheeked salamander. They have dark tops and then gray cheeks and chins and bellies, which is how they get their name. You can see he blends in from this way. Let's see, there we go. Haha, better lighting. I don't know how professional, TV people do this. One of the really neat things that I want to point out is you see how he looks kind of grayish, dusty? That's actually all of this dirt sticking to his wet skin. So that's normally, if he was wet, he'd be just pure black on top. And he's out here looking for something to eat. Let's see. Hi, friend. One of the things I made sure I did before I came out tonight was I washed my hands really well. Because of that moist skin, salamanders can really easily pick up anything that you have on your hands, like lotions. So I always make sure to give mine a good scrub if I know I'm going to be looking for salamanders. Not to mention, some of them breathe through their skin, so you really don't want to get anything on them. Here we go. I'm going to... Nope. Hold on. Keep him low to the ground. So if he falls, he doesn't have that far to go. But when you pick up a salamander, you can actually feel how wet their skin is. And he's pretty big for a gray-cheeked. So, there you go, bud. Be free. I want to point out, unlike frogs, which I can hear right now, salamanders don't make noise. Makes it a little bit harder to look for them. But, one thought that I wanted to do is, again, that tie between salamander traits and frog traits. When do you see frogs hopping across the road? When are frogs typically calling? At night. Another one! Hello, friend. All right, okay, so that's awesome. You see where he just went? He just tucked himself back into his little burrow right there. It's kept him safe all day. Now he's hungry, so he's coming out. We could probably just sit here and stalk him for a little while, but I don't know that he'd appreciate that. And the thought just occurred to me, which tells you how brilliant I am, that the size of these guys, they're pretty big. They're probably the adults that have overwintered, and that there hasn't been a chance for there to be baby gray cheeks, because any eggs that they may have hatched may have not had time to... any eggs they may have laid may not have had time to hatch or mature out of the larval stage. So these are the adults who survived, and we might see the next generation hopefully soon. All right, so we can actually think about how night fits into those three criteria that I've been using. Damp, well, the air feels more damp, and I've noticed you tend to see a lot more salamanders out and about at night after a rain than I do when it's been dry for the last few days. You work with what you got. 2, it's not shelter in the physical sense. However, Are there more or less things out at night that are probably going to want to eat a salamander? I mean, most birds probably would be more than happy to gobble them down. So even if we're just considering birds, the number of predators has decreased dramatically. So they are less likely to get eaten at night, which is a kind of protection. Maybe that was a better word that I should have used. And that third criteria is something that under logs and rocks share, that being in a stream shares, and that being out here at night shares. And I'm starting to feel it in my fingertips, and I haven't been out for more than like 15 minutes. It was in the 60s today. It is currently 50 and dropping. It is cool. So damp, protected, cool places, and night fills those criteria. And that is probably as good a place as any to wrap up. So 4 great cheek salamanders for the night. Not too shabby. I didn't have to break out the plastic salamander and play pretend, which is fantastic. Also, and hindsight being 2020, the part where I said this was going to be a brief program, I don't think it is. So I might cut a bare bones version and put it on YouTube later. I just get really excited about salamanders, guys, and I hope that you're getting excited too. So, back to my past self, who is going to wrap up the program with one last thought about why the Southern Appalachians are such a good place for the salamanders. So yeah. The Southern Appalachians are the oldest existing mountain range left in the world. And that means there has been plenty of time for species to move in and then get separated. So I'm going to use 2 rocks here as an example of how one species of salamander can evolve into 2 simply by being separated through time and space. All right, so if we use our imaginations and pretend that this was once a continuous mountain ridge, let's think back to millions of years ago when a group of salamanders crawled up to the top of the mountain and then crawled along it. Whoop! Some of them fell down into unexpected gorges, and were able to live along that mountain ridge. And they could travel and interbreed, and so they were all one group of salamanders, one species, the Orange Salamanders. Well, when you let a mountain range hang around for millions of years, things tend to change. So let's pretend that eventually a gorge formed between what used to be a single mountain ridge. Now, these salamanders can no longer meet to breathe. They just can't go down and then up again. It's way too far for their tiny little legs. When you let them live on different mountaintops for thousands to hundreds of thousands to millions of years, eventually they won't resemble each other anymore. They will not be the same species. Instead, one of them will develop unique characteristics for the mountain range that it's on. It won't be orange anymore. It'll be the kind of chalky yellow salamanders. And then they're just going to keep drifting farther and farther apart genetically and in terms of behavior or appearance until in the present day we have the orange salamanders and the kind of chalky orange-gray salamanders. When you let mountains and species hang around long enough, they're going to undergo speciation and become different from each other. So that's one of the reasons why the Southern Appalachians are so plentiful in salamanders, because we have multiple instances of this happening. All right, folks. So that is bringing us towards the end of our program. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope that now you know a little bit more about where to look for salamanders, how to look for salamanders, and why you can find so many of them here in the Southern Appalachians. This is the last of our Nature 101s for our off season because we are getting ready to roll into our on season. Summer is coming and I am really excited about that. But it does mean that things are starting to pick up here. And we are taking a step back and looking at what we can offer both in person and virtually. We typically don't continue the Nature 101s through the summer because of how busy we do get. And we are going to explore potentially continuing the garden tours virtually, creating new kinds of virtual content when our summer staff arrive. So not vanishing off the face of the internet forever, certainly not. And if you have any ideas about the kinds of things you'd be interested in seeing, please drop us a note. We are always looking for ideas and what you all would like to learn or see. If you would like to stay up to date on our programming, virtual or in person or otherwise, you can follow our e-blast signing up at highlandsbiological.org. You'll hear all about the awesome stuff that's happening here. Hopefully you get to see some pretty pictures of the botanical garden, like all of the flowers starting to bloom, and learn about what we are planning for the future. Signing up for our e-blast will be a great way to hear about when we're doing a creature feature on Saturday, May 1st as part of Salamander Saturday, and any details about the Western North Carolina section of the City Nature Challenge. It's our region against the rest of the state, so let's go Southern Appalachians, we've got this! It is also a great way to hear about how and when the Nature Center is open. The Botanical Garden continues to remain open all year round, dawn to dusk, free of charge, no reservations necessary. The Nature Center is now open Friday and Saturdays from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. We currently do have a reservation system, so you can find out more information about that on the website. And if you happen to be on the website, please consider making a contribution to the foundation, which makes my position, this programming, and many of the wonderful things here at the station possible. Your support is greatly appreciated, and so is your presence here. It has been amazing to get to connect with you all over the last year, with all of its ups and its downs, new kinds of programs, new kinds of ways to teach people about the Southern Appalachians and show them why we're so special. You being here and you watching is what I do that for. So thank you. This is not the last program. It's not my last send-off. But until the next time that we see each other, whether that's in person or online, be well, stay safe, and see you soon.